Well, the second autopsy has concluded that old George Floyd was in fact murdered. Now, this is kind of interesting because, I mean, we've seen this story so many times before. I mean, even the guy doing the autopsy is somebody who always does these high-profile autopsies. Of course, the second autopsy, because he's not the government medical examiner. But this guy Michael Baden, people may remember because I just talked about him a few months ago because he was the guy hired by Jeffrey Epstein's brother to observe his autopsy. And Michael Baden was one of the people who was kind of an authority figure in a sense because he had credibility before the whole Epstein debacle. Who came out and said, yeah, from what I saw in that autopsy, looks like old Epstein was murdered. And so this will be interesting, because it's not like he's he's known to be some left winger. Which is why he gets hired for these kinds of jobs. He's not seen as a partisan type person, because he also of course did the autopsies, second autopsies for Michael Brown and Eric Garner, which I didn't remember, but is unsurprising because I mean he's kind of I guess he's the closest thing to a celebrity medical examiner as you can get. But I think that it's pretty obvious that this is going to add more fuel to the fire as far as the riots go. This will help put some more wind back in their sails, as if they were losing any steam. But then again, I guess you could make an argument that this really isn't going to make much of a difference anyway, since the violence really, as so many people have pointed out, isn't driven by this whole George Floyd stuff. But I don't know. I think that you do have a lot of people out there, more so than people would like to admit, who are destroying things out of anger over this whole situation, and anger that has been building for a long time. I don't think that this is just pure opportunism by any means. I think that these people are angry at the world, and that they don't see it just as an opportunity to get new stuff. They want to inflict pain on those around them. They want to be heard. I think a lot of them, in a very sort of infantile and childish way, think that by stealing shoes from the Nike store that they are making a difference and taking down the man. I believe it was Sargon of Akkad a few days ago who came up with the rather humorous phrase "looting for justice." But I think that actually, in the minds of these people, is accurate. I think that that the looters, in many cases, do think that they are standing up for justice and showing that hey, if we can't have justice, well then nobody's going to have justice. It's kind of the no justice, no peace mantra from, was it Ferguson, back in however many years ago that was. Was that 2013, I want to say? And so despite what I was saying yesterday, that the protesters can't really escalate more than they already have, that things have gotten pretty bad, I think that something like this, that even though this is not the same as as rioters getting shot, which, by the way, I'll get to. There was a rioter, apparently, that was shot and killed in Louisville. This is, in a way, another blow to this cause, to the, I don't know, whatever you want to call this movement at this point, the post-George Floyd movement, because this will embolden them even more. Just as, I think a violent crackdown would embolden them. And so the violence may be so bad in response to this that we do see an escalation on the part of the other side, of the police or of the citizenry, which I've been talking about, which has to be coming at some point if this continues. Either these riots fizzle out, or people start to strike back. That is the only option left here. Now, what happened in Louisville apparently is that cops of the National Guard, or potentially both, returned live fire because some of the rioters were shooting at them with live ammo. It wasn't just fireworks, it wasn't just bottles. And so they shot back, with the real thing. and killed at least one guy. Now, in Oakland earlier, I don't think I talked about this at the time, there was a shooting where some rioters shot and killed a cop. It was a federal cop, in fact. So, but I'm surprised that, we haven't seen more of this yet, because it's not like, the criminals in these cities who, probably are taking advantage of the chaos to go out looting, aren't armed. They are just, at this point, it seems, choosing not to shoot anyone. But all it takes is a little confusion for another Boston massacre to occur. People don't really remember, but what the Boston massacre was an angry group of protesters, slash mob in Boston, because they were kind of on the line of being a violent group, facing off against a few British soldiers. There was some kind of an altercation, and then one of these British soldiers, fired off a shot, and then what ended up happening was, a bunch of these, so-called peaceful protesters ended up getting shot. And that was a major escalation in the build-up to the American Revolution. Okay, because that leaves an image when you have unarmed folks, being taken out by armed folks. That's why the police are so careful not to use live ammunition on these lightly armed people. I won't say unarmed because they're armed with, bottles, melee weapons, bricks. But let's say one or two guys come there with guns and start shooting at the cops. Well, the cops are going to fire back into the crowd. And they are going to probably end up hitting and potentially killing some unarmed folks. And all it takes is one event like that tonight or any of the other nights, and the rage in response to that will be unlike anything we've seen so far. And this autopsy coming out, by the way, countering the official autopsy, is not going to steer us away from that path. We're still very much headed down that road, that I've been discussing. The government said plain and simple that, George Floyd did not die of asphyxiation. He died of, mostly natural causes, which may have been exacerbated by the police's treatment of him. Whereas Michael Baden's coming out and saying, yeah, it's clear. He was asphyxiated. They choked off, the blood flow to his brain, and that killed him. And so this is a pretty binary situation. Folks are going to be emboldened not only because, their initial suspicions are confirmed by this, but because, it would seem, if Michael Baden's autopsy is accurate, that, the Hennepin County medical examiner is trying to cover up for the police department. And this feeds into the idea that, these folks are oppressed and that they are, rising up against very bad folks, which, again, I think is a fair narrative. I think that that's pretty true. But of course, I do not see rising up against your fellow neighbors and destroying businesses and mauling innocent civilians as rising up against your oppressor. But to the folks who are involved, the folks on the ground, that's a minor detail. To them, you just have to pay in somebody's blood. They don't really care whose blood it is, whether they're a cop or not, whether they're white or black, even at this point, I don't think. They're out to destroy and take away from other people as much as they feel has been taken from them. So we'll see how things go tonight. I'm not feeling optimistic, but, hey, I could be wrong. It could be that there's no more riots tonight and everybody, makes up and goes home and has a nice time, and then, in 6 months nobody remembers this and we're all talking about the election. So if you get anything of value to this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.